The next time you walk through a forest, stop for a moment and stand still. Listen. You'll hear wind, birds, maybe your own breath. What you won't hear is the loudest thing happening around you. Beneath your feet, in every direction, an entire conversation is taking place. Trees are talking to each other right now, warning each other about insects, sending food to their sick, recognizing their children. And for almost all of human history, we had no idea any of it existed. Most of us grew up believing trees are solitary things, that a tree is a tree, a single tall column, rooted in one spot, competing with the trees next to it for sunlight and water. That belief shaped how we cut forests, how we planted them back, how we thought about nature itself. It was completely wrong, and the discovery that changed everything came not from a lab, but from a young Canadian scientist crawling around in the dirt of a British Columbia forest, trying to prove something almost nobody believed. Her name is Suzanne Simard. In the late 1990s, she was a forestry researcher who had noticed something strange. When loggers cut down large old trees, the seedlings planted around them often died, even when there was plenty of light, water, and space. The textbooks said this shouldn't happen. Simard suspected the textbooks were missing something, so she designed an experiment that sounds almost impossible. She took two young trees, a birch and a fir, and grew them side by side. She covered each one in a plastic bag and pumped in a special type of carbon that could be tracked, a carbon isotope she could later trace with a scanner. Then she waited. Within hours, the carbon she had injected into the birch tree started showing up in the fir tree beside it. They were feeding each other, and when she looked closer, she found something no one expected. The trees were connected underground, not by their roots directly, by something far stranger. Every tree in a healthy forest is connected to the trees around it through a network of thread-like fungi called mycorrhiza. These fungi wrap around and even penetrate the tree's root tips, forming a partnership that is hundreds of millions of years old. The tree feeds the fungus sugar. The fungus, in return, extends the tree's reach into the soil, delivering water, nitrogen, and phosphorus the tree could never reach on its own. But that's just where it starts, because those same fungi don't stop at one tree. They branch out through the soil in a vast, sprawling web, connecting to the next tree, and the next, and the next. A single teaspoon of forest soil can contain miles of these fungal threads. An entire mature forest is stitched together underground into a shared living network. Scientists have taken to calling it the Wood Wide Web. And through this network, trees do something no one expected them to be capable of. They communicate. In 2013, a team at the University of Aberdeen ran an experiment on broadbean plants connected by mycorrhizal networks. They released aphids onto one plant. Within hours, the connected plants that had never been touched, began producing defensive chemicals to repel aphids. The infected plant had warned them. Nothing had traveled through the air, nothing had moved above ground. The message had gone through the soil. Since then, the same phenomenon has been documented in dozens of species. Tomato plants warning each other about blight. Douglas firs alerting nearby trees to bark beetle attacks. Willows releasing airborne signals only after their underground allies have already been notified. Forests are running distributed early warning systems, and they've been doing it for hundreds of millions of years. But warning is just the beginning. When Simard's research went deeper, she found something even more surprising. Trees don't just warn each other, they feed each other. Large old trees at the center of a forest, trees she started calling mother trees, were sending sugar, nitrogen, and water through the fungal network to smaller trees around them, especially to their own seedlings. The mother trees could actually recognize their own offspring, and they preferentially sent more nutrients to them than to unrelated seedlings. When a mother tree was dying, she would release her stored nutrients into the network in a final surge, feeding the next generation before she was gone. Think about that for a moment. A tree that spent 200 years growing tall, storing food, collecting nutrients from the soil, spends its final days giving away everything it built to the young trees that will replace it. Not because it was programmed to, because that's what a forest is. A forest is not a collection of trees competing for resources. A forest is a single, sprawling, cooperative organism held together by threads too small to see. And this changes almost everything about how we should think about nature. The forestry industry, for most of the 20th century, operated on the belief that trees compete. So plantations were planted in neat, uniform rows. Different species were kept apart. Old trees were removed to reduce competition for the young ones. Everything about the design was built on the idea that a tree does better with less company. The trees did worse. Simard's research showed that seedlings planted in isolation, cut off from mycorrhizal networks, had significantly lower survival rates than seedlings connected to a mature network. The old trees weren't stealing from the young ones, they were feeding them. We had spent a century removing the parents of the forest, then wondering why the children were struggling. And this is where the story gets uncomfortable. Because if trees are cooperating, warning each other, feeding their young, recognizing their kin, then a question surfaces that most of us are not ready for. What exactly counts as intelligence? Trees do not have brains. They do not have neurons in the way we do. But they process information, remember past events, respond to threats, allocate resources, care for their offspring, and modify their behavior based on the behavior of others around them. A single tree has been shown to remember drought years and adjust its growth rings for decades afterward. Trees produce electrical signals through their tissues that behave remarkably like nerve impulses. Some scientists have started using the word intelligence for what trees do. Others push back hard, arguing that it dilutes the meaning of the word. But even the skeptics agree on one thing. Whatever a forest is doing, it is not what we thought it was doing. And what we thought was silence turns out to be a conversation we simply couldn't hear. Which brings us to the strangest part of this story. For 300,000 years, humans lived inside forests. We slept beneath trees. We buried our dead near them. We built our cultures around them. Almost every early religion recognized specific trees as sacred, as ancestors, as spirits, as beings with presence. We did not have microscopes. We did not have carbon isotopes. We did not have university labs. But we sensed that a forest was alive in a way that went beyond individual trees. We were right. We just had no way to prove it until a few decades ago. And then, in the last 200 years, we cut most of it down. The planet lost half of its forests in that time. Vast underground networks that took thousands of years to build were destroyed in a single afternoon of clear-cutting. Each of those networks was a living system as complex as a coral reef, doing things science is still trying to understand, and they held connections older than any human civilization. When you cut down a mother tree, you don't just kill the tree, you collapse the network that depended on her. The younger trees around her lose their nutrient supply. The fungal threads that took decades to grow lose their central hub. Some of them die, some go dormant, others reroute slowly over years. But the forest that grows back, if one grows back at all, is often a shadow of what stood there before. Cheaper, sparser, quieter. Because the loudest thing in a forest was never the birds or the wind. It was the sound of the network itself, humming beneath the ground, exchanging messages nobody thought to listen for. So the next time you walk through a forest, remember what your ancestors always suspected. The trees around you are not alone. They know each other. They talk to each other, they feed each other, they mourn each other, and you are walking, quite literally, through the middle of a conversation that has been going on for 400 million years. You just can't hear it. Yet.